He was supposed to be in hiding, the most wanted criminal in the Netherlands, on the run for years. Not just in the Netherlands, he's one of the most wanted criminals in the world. But then, out of nowhere, new footage has surfaced. Jos Leijdekkers, better known as Bolle Jos, isn't scrambling to avoid capture. He's attending a public event, seated next to the president's daughter in Sierra Leone. Look at this. A €200,000 bounty, a 24-year prison sentence in the Netherlands, another 10-year sentence in Belgium, the top spot in Europol's most wanted list. Interpol, Europol and intelligence agencies across the world are after him. Yet here he is, nonchalant, in plain sight. Why isn't he showing any signs of being on the run? He has a good reason for that, as he seems to have the support of a person none other than the president of Sierra Leone himself. Standing next to the president's daughter, Agnes Bio, what could a criminal like him possibly be doing at this event? This is not a fugitive scrambling to evade capture. This is a man who has secured his place at the top of the food chain in a country where he can't be touched. Dutch authorities and Interpol have been after him for years. But Leijdekkers hasn't just escaped justice, he has fortified himself inside a system that works for him, not against him. Rumoured to be married to the president's daughter, he has fortified his relationships with the political elite of the Sierra Leone government. On top of that, he has reportedly attained the country's citizenship, which makes his extradition to the Netherlands trickier. But the Sierra Leone government has expressed willingness to cooperate with Dutch authorities. What are the odds of that happening? Would Jos be extradited to the Netherlands for his crime? But before we find answers to these questions, let's take a look at who this shrewd man is and how he landed at the top of Europol's most wanted list. A clumsy boy, as shown in the earlier shared photo by the police, with a lame nickname, Bolle Jos, who may have misled many, but he is one of the most menacing criminals in the underworld. The police also corrected their mistakes and shared an updated picture of Jos. Nevertheless, Joseph Johannes Leijdekkers has worked his way up from a shy-looking boy to a leading narcotic lord in 10 years. According to many, he was an easygoing, party-loving Breda boy until he turned 14. His peers from Prinsenbeek remember him as someone who threw big parties at his home. According to an article in BN De Stem, they could never have imagined that this stout Brabant boy would grow up to be one of the most wanted and feared coke bosses. But don't let the mentions of big parties deceive you in believing that Jos came from a big-shot corporate background. His father owned a well-known brothel in Breda. Until 2000, his father, Leijdekkers, was registered with the municipality as the owner of a sex club, Reeperbahn, on the Belgium in Breda. The club was so renowned that even now its name carries faded glory. The reputation of the club paid off as Father Leijdekkers sold his business and retired in Spain. According to some, the club was a notorious establishment that served as a meeting ground for criminals of all kinds. It wasn't just a place for entertainment. Behind closed doors, it was a hub for shady deals and activities. It was here that Jos got his first taste of how power worked. He watched as men exchanged envelopes filled with cash, as favours were traded in whispers, as disputes were settled with violence, not negotiations. Jos was getting into trouble from a young age. One notable incident took place in Scheveningen when he was 19 years old. What started as a simple dispute over a bar stool escalated into a dangerous confrontation. While most people would settle such arguments with words or, at worst, a minor scuffle, Jos took things to a new level. He pulled out a firearm. This reckless act led to his first major brush with the law, earning him a 6-year prison sentence. Then, at just 19, he made headlines after stabbing 2 boys in a violent confrontation. This earned him his first prison sentence and cemented his reputation as someone not to be crossed. But Leijdekkers was never interested in small-time street fights. He had bigger ambitions. The lucrative coke trade was calling, and he answered. According to Peter Schouten, who was the Crown witness lawyer in the Ridouan Taghi case, he had a good organisational talent, is someone who can develop a stormy action when things need to be done, and who pays attention to the details. He also has a lot of people walking around the ports for him, for the illegal narcotic trade. Bolle Jos managed to remain relatively unknown to the general public for a long time. He would have continued to do so until he came under the police's radar due to the interception of Sky ECC, an encrypted messaging service. The intercepted communication showed that he had a lot of people working in the port of Antwerp, the hub for coke trade. The chats also revealed how Bolle Jos called the shots in the narcotic trade in a fairly direct way. Authorities believe that he was the user named El Presidente and gave direct instructions to corrupt security guards in the Belgian port area. An incident in August 2020 proved to be a decisive factor in Jos's case. On August the 25th, 2020, a tanker ship named NV Andromeda was docked at Quay 208. Containing hazardous substances on board and a crew member who just tested positive for COVID-19, the ship was guarded by a Brabo Port Company employee. Now, the ship might not be central to the story, but the guard was. He thwarted the malicious plans to steal 476 kilograms of coke from a reefer container at the Belgian New Fruit Wharf Quay. The guard, a fire guard, was sitting in his car, keeping watch for the ship, given its dangerous contents. It didn't bode well for the criminals, so they overpowered him in an extremely violent way. Leijdekkers ordered the others to knock him unconscious, tie him up, and lock him in a container until the gang retrieved the narcotics from the refrigerated container. He asked them to shoot him in the knee if he resisted, but as a plastic bag was pulled over the guard's head, who was hit as well, he managed to escape by jumping into the harbour dock, swam for about 45 minutes and hid behind the container ship. He was rescued by the crew and raised the alarm. As the police arrived, the criminals fled, leaving behind the contraband and a lot of traces. Some of them were caught on camera as well. Alongside, the gang planned to remove a consignment of 300 kilos of coke which was smuggled out of the port. The Sky ECC investigation led to a narcotic trial that was named Dossier Zwemmer. The trial involved 30 people, including Jos, his associate Isaac Bombignon, Yannick Flash W and Floor Bressers. They faced charges including importation of narcotics, assault, violation of gun laws and participation in a criminal organisation. An arrest warrant was issued for Jos, who was believed to be operating from abroad for a long time now. His suspected abode at that time was Dubai. That's not the only case implicating Bolle Jos. His name also comes up in the elimination of Belgian businessman Stefan Bogert in 2017. He traded in sea containers in the Antwerp port and died behind his car's wheel. The execution led to the mention of his name in the public eye. He was referred to as the Great Mystery Man, about whom any new information was rarely available. Nevertheless, he was perceived as both very dangerous and very wealthy. Some dubbed him the Cocaine Cowboy, as he had become wealthy in a short time through illicit trade. According to a criminal source, Bolle Jos was even crazier than Ridouan T and immediately settled accounts with people who betrayed him. But still, his name didn't create enough ripples. He came into the public eye properly when the police connected him with the disappearance of Naima Gilal in October 2019. Naima, the godmother of coke, had got into a VW Polo with false license plates, had a home in Amsterdam and was never seen again. According to the Dutch media, Jos played an important role in this disappearance. His role became evident for the investigation into Ridouan Taghi, whose BlackBerry chats included photos of Jalil. One of the photos showed a naked woman tied to a chair with tape. Another one zoomed in on the woman's waist while she sat on the chair and had a severed thumb or finger and toe on her stomach. In the third photo, the woman was lying on her stomach on the floor. Police believed that the woman was Jalal and was tortured brutally. They assumed she was no longer alive. If one had any qualms about Jos's brutality, they must have vanished now. That's why people say he's more violent and ruthless than Taghi. Another police investigation, instigated in 2021, involved a port warehouse in Antwerp. It turned out that Jalal's body was placed on the concrete floor there, but her remains couldn't be found. Her clothing and handbag was found in the warehouse. The police also stated that she could have been underground, but ground radar, sniffer dogs and digging couldn't reveal anything. Bolle Jos denied involvement in Auntie Naima's disappearance, and his lawyers also denied that his client was El Presidente. This warehouse made the headlines previously when about 4.2 tons of coke was discovered by the authorities. The contraband was hidden in frozen squid. While 14 suspects were arrested, none gave any statements. That's the extent of fear the name Bolle Jos holds, even in criminal circles. Nevertheless, apart from Aunt Naima's startling case, Jos is famous for keeping torture chambers for intimidation. According to whistleblowers, Leijdekkers' organisation used soundproof torture chambers to punish associates who mishandled shipments. These brutal tactics ensured absolute obedience. That's why people, regardless of their status in the criminal world, are reluctant to cross him in any way, let alone testify against him. By 2022, the walls were closing in. Belgium and Dutch authorities launched a major crackdown, raiding stash houses, arresting dozens and seizing millions in cash. Investigators were also convinced they had Jos cornered, but when they moved in, he was already gone. He didn't just vanish, he evaporated. As the dragnet widened, authorities scrambled for leads. Intelligence pointed to Dubai, where several European kingpins had found refuge, but no arrests were made. Jos had left just enough breadcrumbs to keep them looking into the wrong places. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that Jos wasn't even in Europe anymore. While investigators scrambled across Spain, Turkey and Russia, convinced Jos was hiding in luxury villas or underground safe houses, he was making the smartest move of his career. He wasn't just running anymore, he was disappearing in plain sight. For years, Jos had built a system of misdirection, spreading rumours about his whereabouts, leaking false sightings and leaving behind just enough evidence to keep investigators chasing their own tails. European law enforcement never saw what was coming next. The Dutch police placed him at number 1 on the National Wanted list in May 2022. He was later included in the EU's Most Wanted list. A reward of €75,000 initially was announced for the tip about his whereabouts or any information leading to his arrest. He is linked to serious crimes including elimination. The Sky ECC interception revealed that he played a prominent role in international coke trade and laundered tens of millions of euros as well as hundreds of kilos of gold. Along with Antwerp, Leijdekkers was also involved in smuggling at the Rotterdam port. As if Belgium and the Netherlands weren't enough for his notoriety, he became famous in Turkey as well. Turkish performer Belal Oze, who lived in Amsterdam, was working on a mockumentary about Jos. As part of his project, he popped up wanted posters about Jos in the Turkish city of Erdin that included a staggering amount of money for the golden tip about his whereabouts. Even after the recordings, one of the posters remained hanging. A journalist wrote a piece about it, and the hunt for Bolle Jos went viral. Soon, the fact that groups of Turks or all of Turkey are looking for Jos started making headlines, making Jos a Turkish hype. In 2023, Jos made headlines again for threatening former Dutch minister Ferd Grappenhaus. The minister was put under heavy police protection, but the incident showed how far Jos's territory and power reached. Nevertheless, Jos was finally sentenced in his absence to 24 years in prison by Dutch courts in September 2024. He was also sentenced to 12 years in Belgium. However, both sentences don't have seemed to have been a problem for him, as he is still at large. The reward for information leading to his arrest is a whopping €200,000. This is a huge reward amount, given that even Taggy's reward was €100,000 when he was on the run. While Bolle Jos was on the run, the Dutch police department got to his family members, who enjoyed all the perks and privileges of being related to him. From a penthouse with a view of the Dubai skyline to expensive designer watches, they've seen it all. But now the authorities are confiscating this splendour left and right. Jos's mother and sister resided in an apartment in the famous artificial peninsula shaped like a palm tree, Palm Jumeirah. The penthouse overlooking the Dubai skyline cost between €750,000 and €5.5 million. It was in the mother's name, but the sister used it frequently. What's more, the mother-daughter duo also used 2 different Bentleys. 6 designer handbags from Chanel, Louis Vuitton and Dolce & Gabbana were found at the sister's house. She also had 4 Rolex watches. The police also found very expensive watches from brands such as Patek Philippe, Audemars Piguet and Richard Mille in both the mother's and father's houses. The combined value of these 2 watches belonging to the Leijdekkers senior is estimated at €140,000. Expensive watches are the favourite purchase of criminals, not just because they look good on the wrist. It's because they're small but value thousands of euros. They are also a great investment as their value doesn't decrease. In fact, rare models increase in value with time. In December 2023, Jos's brother also got arrested in Turkey. The brother, Wilhelmus Andreas Leijdekkers, was arrested based on the decrypted messages from a downed computer server that was also in use by Jos. According to the police, Jos's parents and sister travelled to Turkey, along with other places, in August and December 2022, where they had contact with their wanted son and brother. Jos's last known haven was Turkey, as early as 2023. Reportedly, he had been arrested twice in Turkey, but was released after paying large bribes. What's more, in 2024, his henchman was also released in Turkey. A criminal case against Jos's enterprise was conducted in Turkey, leading to the arrest of the group's members. They included Jos's brother-in-law, Abdullah Alp-Yu, and his older brother. A manhunt was also going on in Turkey for Jos. While Jos escaped arrest, his right-hand man, Isaac B., was arrested. Notably, the Turkish trial was the country's largest narcotic operation involving 51 individuals. However, the High Court decided to release the suspects on condition that they didn't leave the country. Jos's older brother, Harry Leijdekkers, was also released, but has to serve a sentence in the Netherlands. He was arrested in Breda in 2018 in a stolen Audi RS4 while he had a weapon in his waistband. The car also contained a pair of taped ski goggles, a balaclava, a claw hammer, brass knuckles, a stun gun, black gloves, handcuffs and tie wraps. Nevertheless, Isaac B. remained in a Turkish prison. He was later extradited to the Netherlands in 2023. He is rumoured to have fallen out with Bolle Jos. Nevertheless, Isaac also stood to serve a long prison sentence in both the Netherlands and Belgium. He was sentenced to 12 years in the Netherlands as one of the leaders of a gang responsible for the import of 5,700 kilos of coke. He also had a conviction in Belgium for involvement in an attack in Antwerp. He was sentenced to 6 years. After B was arrested in Turkey, both Belgium and the Netherlands requested his extradition so that he can still serve those sentences. Isaac B tried to prevent it at all costs. "My life is here. My family is here. I do not want to be extradited," B said during the hearing at the court in Istanbul. He was released to await the extradition in freedom. However, he had to adhere to various conditions, such as an international travel ban and house arrest. After B was taken to a house just outside of Istanbul, he was said to have been on the point of fleeing abroad. When he wanted to get into a waiting car, he was arrested again, but he denied any escape attempt. "I had forgotten my phone and some personal belongings. I went to get them. When I got into the car, there was a situation outside. I got into the car and in 1 or 2 seconds later, I was arrested. They said I wanted to leave, but that's not true. There was no one in the driver's seat and the door of my house was still open." After that, the Turkish Supreme Court decided that he will remain in prison until his extradition. Coming back to Bolle Jos, as the authorities speculated about Jos's whereabouts, he emerged in Sierra Leone in strange circumstances. But before we move on to the circumstances, let's discuss why Sierra Leone. What could this West African country possibly be offering a fugitive coke trade leader like him? The Dutch authorities were already suspecting that Jos L was in Freetown and posing as a Norwegian-Turkish businessman. Sierra Leone has become a central point in the logistics of narcotics trade. The coke containers intercepted in the Antwerp port came from the West African country. The country, with only 8 million population, provides a port pivotal transit for coke trade. The Freetown port offers an ideal route and an opportunity to circumvent the strict controls in place at Antwerp and Rotterdam ports on containers coming from South America. This coke route runs via West Africa and offers an alternative to the convention illicit trade pathway. The criminals are increasingly using West Africa, mainly unstable states in the Sahel region, to avoid European scrutiny. That's how West Africa has become an international hub where hashish coming from North Africa, tramadol from Southeast Asia, smack from Afghanistan and coke from Latin America are stored and traded.
Cocaine is the most seized drug in the region after cannabis resin. The location of the Sahel, lying south of the Sahara Desert.
President Bio declared a national emergency in April 2024 for safeguarding an entire generation from narcotic abuse. However, the government's top officials are involved in narcotic trade and earning a lot of money from it. Only a few weeks ago, a major scandal emerged regarding this phenomenon. The authorities in neighbouring Guinea seized 7 suitcases with coke and $2,000 in cash that were being transported in a car from the Sierra Leone embassy. Guinea expelled the ambassador and accused the Sierra Leone government of close ties with traffickers. The political opposition supports this allegation and says that Bolle Jos has bribed the president to enjoy his protection. In fact, he's rumoured to have been given Sierra Leonean nationality. This cannot be confirmed, and given that the opposition gains from the president's portrayal as a criminal and profiteer, we have to take these rumours with a grain of salt. As for Jos's choice of safe haven, the reason could be its close ties with the political elite, pervasive corruption, as well as the absence of an extradition treaty between the Netherlands and Sierra Leone. The Dutch embassy is located in Ghana, which is 3 countries away from this safe abode. According to international criminal lawyer Gert-Jan Knoops, according to him, there are 2 reasons for this. First of all, there is no extradition treaty between the Netherlands and Sierra Leone. In addition, Mr. Leijdekkers is also said to have Sierra Leonean citizenship. This combination means that the Netherlands cannot simply request Sierra Leone to transfer him to the Netherlands. According to Follow the Money and AD, the prosecution service already knew that Jos was in Sierra Leone. The authorities received tips from political opposition in Sierra Leone that the coke baron had settled in the capital Freetown and enjoyed good relations with the country's president, Julius Maida Bio, and several other influential people. These connections proved to be so close that he was seen attending a New Year's Mass in the president's remote birthplace on January the 1st. The footage was shared by the president's press office and his wife. It showed a church full of locals, with Jos L being the only Westerner. He is seated a few rows behind the president and first lady. Responding to the reports, the African country's Minister of Information stated that it is investigating the case and willing to cooperate with the Dutch police and Interpol. On the criminal's attendance of the New Year event, it stated that the president attends many family functions and has no knowledge of the identity of the individual in question. But there seems to be just one problem with this version, as per social media. The criminal is seated next to the president's daughter. If the president doesn't know about his attendance, how come this man sits next to his daughter? Rumours maintain that Jos is in a romantic relationship with the president's daughter, which makes his capture more unlikely. For Dutch authorities, this is a dead end. Unlike the US or UK, the Netherlands has little influence in West Africa. Without an extradition treaty or diplomatic leverage, there's no way to pressure Sierra Leone into handing him over. Jos has played his hand perfectly. He didn't just choose a place to hide, he chose a place where he could thrive, surrounded by wealth, power and a government unwilling to act against him. Jos Leijdekkers is beyond the reach of Dutch law. Without an extradition treaty between Sierra Leone and the Netherlands, there's no legal way to bring him back. Dutch authorities can issue warrants, pressure international bodies and place him on every most wanted list. But none of that matters if the countries he's residing in refuses to act. Sierra Leone's government has already denied knowing who he is, despite photographic and video evidence placing him at high-profile events. This means the Dutch government is at an impasse. If Sierra Leone won't cooperate, Jos stays free. Could Dutch intelligence launch a secret mission to capture him? In theory, yes. Other countries have done it before. Israel's Mossad kidnapped Adolf Eichmann in Argentina and brought him to trial. The US Navy SEALs eliminated Osama bin Laden in Pakistan without permission from the local government. But there's a critical difference. Such missions operate outside international law. If the Dutch tried to extract Jos forcibly, it would be considered as an act of aggression against a sovereign nation, potentially sparking diplomatic fallout. Would they go even further? Could Jos be assassinated? The thought isn't unrealistic. High-profile crime bosses don't always die of old age. Many are either captured or eliminated. He's built a network of protection, but power is never permanent. Right now, his grip on Sierra Leone's political elite make him untouchable. But what happens if alliances shift? What if he falls out of favour? His survival depends on his connections, and political alliances can change overnight. If President Bio is overthrown or pressured by the international community, Jos could find himself in a vulnerable position. Governments protect criminals only as long as it benefits them. The moment he becomes a liability, his so-called safe haven could turn into a death trap. If Sierra Leone faces international sanctions, an economic crisis or political instability, Jos could become a bargaining chip. He may have evaded justice for now, but criminal empires rarely last forever. His next move will determine whether he remains untouchable or becomes another fugitive brought down by the very system he manipulated. But staying in power isn't just about escaping the law, it's also about surviving the criminal underworld. Could rival drug lords turn against him? The cocaine trade is cutthroat, and Jos has made plenty of enemies. If competitors see him as a threat or an opportunity, they could eliminate him just to take over his operations. Some of the most feared drug lords in history have been taken out by their own kind. As for Jos L, the Dutch authorities can circumvent the extradition law. the government of Sierra Leone could declare him an undesirable alien, which would force him to return to the Netherlands. That only works if Leijdekkers is not a citizen of the African country. But if Bolle Jos has already attained the citizenship of his new abode, things can become tricky for the Dutch authorities. That is not the only hitch, Knoeps continues. There is no strong diplomatic relationship between Sierra Leone and the Netherlands. There is no embassy, only an honorary consul. That makes it a difficult negotiation to have him declared an undesirable alien. The relationship between the two countries is not friendly. According to Knoeps, Sierra Leone had much more affinity with countries like China and Russia, and in recent years you see a trend that fewer and fewer countries in West and Central Africa want to cooperate with Europe. If you add all of these factors together, it is very questionable whether Sierra Leone will cooperate with an undesirable declaration by Leijdekkers, Knoeps continues. Minister of Justice David Van Weel has expressed that he wants an extradition treaty with Sierra Leone as soon as possible, but it will take about 2 years before a treaty is in place, and then you still have to see whether the extradition is legally possible. History is filled with criminals who thought they were untouchable until they weren't. Pablo Escobar ruled an empire, yet he died on a rooftop, hunted by police and rivals alike. El Chapo ran the Sinaloa cartel with an iron fist, but even he was finally captured and extradited. So, what destiny has in store for Bolle Jos, and whether the Dutch authorities will succeed in bringing him back to face justice, only time can tell.